Good evening and welcome. I am Uyai Aniekan, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. This is Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. Today on Spotlight Africa, China's leader makes first visit to Africa in 5 years. CAR president gets unlimited terms in power. Niger suspended by African Union after coup. Moroccan king pardons more than 650 prisoners. Plus, Senegal brings back survivors of boat tragedy. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. Do stay with us. Good evening and thanks for joining us. First in Spotlight Africa, Chinese President Xi Jinping is in South Africa for his first visit to Africa in 5 years as part of being a member of the BRICS Summit of major emerging economies. The BRICS Summit, which gathers Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, is looking at whether to make the grouping even bigger by admitting new members. The Chinese president, who is also paying a state visit, arrived in Johannesburg on Monday night and was welcomed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Later today, Xi will co-chair the China-Africa Leaders Dialogue with Ramaphosa on the sidelines of the summit. Several African countries have previously expressed interest in joining BRICS, including Algeria, Egypt and Ethiopia. A total of 69 countries have been invited to the summit, including all African states. In a related development, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has reiterated that his country will not be drawn into global power dynamics. Ramaphosa's televised address came ahead of the meeting of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa in Johannesburg today. He noted that his decision does not mean that the country is neutral on matters of principle and national interest. In another development, the Central African Republic's top court has approved the outcome of the July referendum that increases a president's term to 7 years and removes the term limit. The court declared that an overwhelming majority of 95% approved the vote and turnout was about 57%. The new law creates an office of a vice president as appointed by the president and a unicameral parliament, doing away with the Senate. It also bans politicians with dual citizenship from running for president and increases the number of Supreme Court judges from 9 to 11. It will be recalled that the top court had last September scrapped the committee tasked with drafting the new law before the court's president, Daniel Dalan, was forcibly retired. Elsewhere, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has welcomed a Commonwealth delegation which has been tasked with observing Zimbabwe's elections into his official residence. The team arrived at the State House as the Commonwealth continues to decide whether it should readmit Zimbabwe. Former President Robert Mugabe pulled Zimbabwe out of the group in 2003 after the nation was suspended for human rights violations. Zimbabwe applied to rejoin after Mnangagwa took office in 2018. Reports say on Monday, Zimbabwe's Information Ministry posted a video of the Commonwealth's delegation leader at the State House. Observer groups from the European Union, regional blockades, Moving away from that, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has rejected Niger junta's 3-year power transition plan. ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security Abdel Fattah Musa stated this during an interview with newsmen. Recall that the head of the military junta in Niger Republic, General Abdourahmane Tidiane, had said he would relinquish power within 3 years and warned that any intervention by foreign forces will not be a walk in the park. He stated this in a televised address that their ambition is not to confiscate power as their transition period will not exceed 3 years. According to him, there is availability of any dialogue provided that it takes into account the aspirations of the people of Niger. Meanwhile, the African Union AU has suspended Niger from all its activities following the military coup last month. The African Union Peace and Security Council called on all of its member states and the international community to refrain from any action that could legitimize the junta in Niger. It reiterated calls for the coup military action to reinstate the president. Meanwhile, Niger's junta has said that civilian rule cannot be restored for 3 years, but this has been dismissed by ECOWAS as unacceptable. In a related development, Ghana's biggest trade union body has warned against military intervention to reverse the coup in Niger. According to the Trade Union Congress, constitutional order could be re-established in Niger through diplomacy if ECOWAS leaders and military action against the military junta which overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum last month. The junta has proposed a 3-year transition back to civilian rule, but ECOWAS has rejected it. The regional bloc has also imposed sanctions on Niger. Traders in Ghana say they are now experiencing difficulties in importing vegetables such as onions from Niger and that prices of commodities have increased. In a separate development, King Mohammed VI of Morocco has pardoned more than 650 people convicted of various crimes, some of them terrorist-related. The move marks the 70th anniversary of an event known as the Revolution of the King and the Nation. The occasion is intended to highlight the country's liberation from colonialism. Moving away from that, more than 6 weeks after they left Senegal, 38 survivors from the boat tragedy off Cape Verde returned to Dakar via a military plane on Monday evening. They are among 101 people who set out for the journey on July 10, trying to reach Spain's Canary Islands. Reports say more than 60 people, most of them men from the fishing town of Fas Boye and the surrounding area, are feared dead after their boat drifted at sea for over a month. There's still sadness and anger in this town after the boat tragedy. A few inhabitants, including members of the same family, told newsmen that they were relieved knowing their relatives were on the way back home alive. Away from that, Somalia has announced a ban on social media platforms TikTok and Telegram and the online betting platform 1xBet. The government says the platforms were being used by terrorists and groups responsible for spreading immorality to spread graphic clips, photos and mislead society. It comes as Somalia announces an ambitious target to crush the Al-Shabaab militant group, which still controls large swaths of the country within the next 5 months. Now, according to the Ministry of Communications and Technology in a statement, internet service providers are required to implement the ban by 24th of August or face unspecified legal action. Meanwhile, a recent conference on internet and social media security in the capital Mogadishu highlighted the negative impact of online platforms on young people, including causing some of them to lose their lives. In Egypt, authorities have arrested then released a journalist who published articles accusing officials of involvement in smuggling cash, weapons and gold to Zambia. The allegations by Karim Assad followed the seizure by Zambian officials of a chartered ammunition and over 100 kg of suspected gold. Documents purportedly from a Zambian investigation had allegedly named several Egyptian army and police officers as suspects. Meanwhile, Egypt's National Press Union says Assad was the 24th journalist to be detained in the country. Kenyan accused of stealing coffins from funeral homes. Stay tuned for details of these and more after this time out. Thanks for staying tuned in now to the rest of the stories on Spotlight Africa. On a rather sad development, at least 620 people are reported to have died at Maputo's Central Hospital in the past 40 days as a result of a health workers' strike. According to reports, Mozambican medics are on strike for the first time in the country's history, and doctors in particular have extended their strike for another 21 days despite receiving death threats. Meanwhile, the striking workers say they lack medicine and vital equipment and even have to pay out of their pockets to stock ambulances with basic gear. They say they have no choice but to strike and are calling for Health Minister Amindono Tiago to be sacked. The government, however, says it regrets that doctors have taken the decision to extend their strike despite the progress it says they have made in meeting their demands. In Nigeria, a group of 161 Nigerians have been reportedly repatriated from Libya as part of a voluntary UN-supported scheme. Reports say they arrived on a flight from Tripoli at the airport in the main city of Lagos on Monday. They included 75 women and 6 children who had been held in detention facilities in Libya. Libya's interior minister was quoted as saying that 102 of those repatriated had been stopped at the border between Libya and Tunisia. Libya is a major but deadly migrant route for Africans seeking to illegally cross over to Europe via the Mediterranean Sea. Meanwhile, an official at Nigeria's embassy in Libya confirmed to newsmen that the migrants had not been forced to return home. Away from that, the whereabouts of opposition Ethiopian lawmaker Christian Tadele, detained in relation to ongoing a member of the city council in the capital, Addis Ababa. Earlier this month, the lawyer who represents them both, Hanok Akilu, has told newsmen that the two politicians have not been visited by their representatives or their family members and have not appeared in court. Christian and Dr. Kasa are two of the several people arrested as intense fighting in Amhara prompted the government to declare a 6-month state of emergency last week. Fighting has subsided in urban areas after the army to the Horn of Africa, Mike Hammer, has traveled to Belgium to discuss with the EU possible ways of finding peaceful resolutions for violence in Amhara and the Oromia regions. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch has accused Saudi Arabian border guards of systematically killing hundreds of Ethiopian economic migrants trying to cross from war-torn Yemen. They say at least 655 people have been killed by guards since early last year. Some were shot, others killed or maimed by explosive weapons. Now, according to reports, the organization spent months collecting evidence after the United Nations made similar allegations last year. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch has called the killings widespread and systematic and says they could amount to crimes against humanity. It will be recalled that in March, the Saudi government categorically rejected any suggestion that its forces were involved in cross-border killings. In another development, a sales employee in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, has been charged with the theft of 2 coffins and 26 coffin handles, according to local reports. Maureen Kikani, who was an employee of St. Augustine Funeral Services, is accused of stealing the items over a week-long period in May of last year. She denies all charges. The coffins were valued at 90,000 Kenyan shillings and the handles at $810. Reports say bail has been set at $1,380,000 by Milimani Court Magistrate Ben Mark Ekubi. Meanwhile, the lawyer representing Kihani had called for more lenient bail terms, emphasizing her role as a single mother. Lastly, today on Spotlight Africa, Kenyan law healing a friend's alleged HIV status in a WhatsApp group. The ruling came from the HIV and AIDS Tribunal in Kenya, who said that a person's HIV status should not be disclosed to third parties without consent. The complainant said that as a result of the message in the WhatsApp group, which had about 170 members, he faced discrimination and is now undergoing counseling because of the psychological toll it had taken. He's also been awarded 3,000 Kenyan shillings in special damages. And that's all we have for you today. This has been Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio, bringing you stories and news from all around the continent. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. You can also follow us on planetradio.ng. My name is Uyai Anyek, and thanks for being a part of this. To enjoy the rest of your evening.